Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this Sunday morning. My name is Marder. I'm the Director of Programming for Photo LA. Can you guys hear me in the back?
Yes.
So this is the 8th of 10 panel discussions on current issues of photography that are playing out over the course of this weekend. I'm pleased to introduce Digressions on the Photographic Narrative with David Gilbert, Genevieve Gaignard, Dariush, Nehdaran, and Malerie Marder, and it's moderated by Rebecca Lowery. Turn it over to her.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here with us this morning. I hope that we're going to have a fairly lively and just free-ranging conversation about the persistence of narrative strategies in contemporary photography and what different forms and mutations this can take in the varied bodies of work of the photographers who are up here on stage with me. So we're going to start, I think, by allowing each of our guest artists to spend a few minutes introducing their work and talking about it just in their own terms, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. In terms of an order, from the end to the back this way. Yeah? Okay, so we'll start with David.
All right. Hi, my name is David Gilbert. Happy to be on this panel. Can everyone hear? Yes. Okay. So, happy to be here and interesting because I'm not really a portrait photographer, which is often, I think, one of the first places we go to when we think of narrative photography. And so, I studied photography, but then started working a lot more in sculpture and painting and installation. And I kind of came back to photography in a kind of practical way, in that I was making these sculptures and I didn't really have much sculptural background, I didn't have any training, and as I was making these things, they literally I couldn't move them, I couldn't move them across the studio, or, I'm not bending over weirdly. So they would, sort of like, they were these precarious situations, and I started using photography to actually just capture them and to hold them in place. And so it was like kind of turning to photography was at first like a practical mode. I brought a lot of pictures, but we can just go through them quickly as I introduce them. So it was a practical decision at first, and then I started realizing that I was making these sculptures and they were sort of like not well made and a little bit like abject, but that by photographing them, I could make them more monumental, give them a little bit of pathos and heroicism, and and I was kind of thinking about it, like, especially once, like at the beginning, I was thinking about photography like by Avedon or Penn, but instead of photographing like a glamorous fashion model, I was photographing this sort of like messy sculpture, but I wanted to give it that same sense of sort of like glamour, but then there's also this sort of like joke that it was a mess. So that there's this sort of like push-pull between like the mess and like a sort of like humanity. But then the joke is that they're not human, they're sculptures, and you can kind of see very clearly that they're made out of fabric and wood, and their materiality is always very clear. And that's sort of where I think the narrative comes in, is that you kind of start constructing sort of a narrative about them, and it's about imagination, and to me it's like a little bit of an aesthetic of a 5th grade school play. So it's sort of like very tapped together materials that become something else. And so in this kind of series, or like the next few images, it's the same sculpture over and over again, and I kind of realized that then you can see the sculpture in different guises, and how it evolves, and how photography often is documentary. You document people aging, and then I can do the same thing in my studio, kind of like document how a sculpture kind of comes to be, and then kind of falls apart, and sometimes it's center stage, and sometimes it's off to the side. Yeah, and so the work the kind of like white backdrop of the work fell away. It became less about documentation, and it became more like a world that I was creating, and these sort of like beings in it. There, yeah. Yeah, and I'm also looking at a lot of painting, a lot of kind of like traditional still life painting, Dutch masters, and I was kind of thinking of them, like this one I kind of thought of like as like a pregnant woman. So there was sort of like a bulge and this kind of like gray fabric and lighting, and that it was this way of like using lighting and point of view to make these things kind of more dramatic, and that things that like in person you might walk right by them, but that in a photograph could become more arresting and kind of like make you notice it and pay attention to it. I mean, one of the big people who was big for me when I was starting out was Diana Arbus, and I kind of thought a lot about the underdog, and I think a lot of her work kind of gave us pictures and images of people who never had their image taken before. So I kind of think about that in terms of making images of things that normally we wouldn't, like a sort of like scrap of fabric or a pile of paper, kind of like become things that become beautiful or are given our attention or our notice. It's often like I think a lot about gesture and about dance. So these things are often like really precariously balanced, and then I'm kind of photographing them right before they fall over. I think the next slide is a picture of how a show would be installed. And so I print the pictures quite large, so that often there's this sense that this sort of small thing becomes heroic. It becomes like a history painting. But there's always like the joke in it that it's like just crumpled up paper or a piece of fabric. And yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a sort of a push-pull in the images of ones that are more, we can kind of go get pictures quickly, I don't want to take up too much time. But there's like a push-pull between sort of ones that are a little more staged, but sometimes I'm sort of like go in as like I kind of feel like I'm an anthropologist, like I make things and I'm like working and making, and then I go in the morning, and the way that the light hits something, I try not to rearrange things, and so there's often like the mess and the weirdness that's lying around. And then there are ones that are more theatrical, and where the set is sort of like more apparent, and you're sort of more in the world. And the work also, like, the ones especially I picked today for this panel are more figurative. They're more, I think of them more as portraits, and they sort of have aspects of gender and sexuality in them, but it's sort of also a little ridiculous, like it's cardboard boxes with some fabric draped around it, so like it has that stuff, but it can always be sort of taken away. So kind of playing with the fantasy of that. That one's called Yarnia. And so this one is, and then the next one is that same kind of ball of yarn that exploded apart. So kind of taking the same materials, and from image to image, you see them change, you see them evolve, and kind of like an all-over composition or something that's more arranged or decorative versus something that's more of a portrait. The next three I brought in because it's three images and they're all taken kind of on the same backdrop. And this is one where I sort of thought about it as a theater set with different kind of like characters coming onto the stage and different lighting and different mood. And I think that's kind of what photography does, especially in terms of sculpture, for me, is that it really establishes sort of like mood and lighting, and there's a sort of like emotional quality to the work that comes up. And to me, that all has to do with narrative, is sort of like this story that you tell yourself through the pictures. That one's called Gone Girl. And sort of like the fact that there are no people in the pictures, I think I wanted to then have this sort of haunted feeling, like that there's like a person, that's me, I guess, who makes this stuff, but the pictures are always sort of empty. And there's sort of like a playfulness, but then also sort of like a Miss Havisham, sort of like the past. emptiness and sort of ghostly quality to them. That's my Vermeer. Or my attempt at a Vermeer. And then I've been bringing more recently a lot of like flowers and kind of organic things like butterflies into the work, because I do think that the studio and the interior functions as a sort of in a sort of like an ecosystem. So like as the flowers grow and the sculptures grow, I think that's sort of related to how like an ecosystem flowers grow and things kind of come together and then fall apart. And I think that's it for me. Thanks very much.
Genevieve, Gaignard. Finding some slides. My slides are in no particular order, but I just wanted to give a bit of a reference to my fuller practice. I'm mostly known for photographing myself as different characters. That kind of idea started to, I guess, express how it is to be a biracial woman, for me, from my perspective. How we navigate through the world, how other people see us, and I usually pass as white to most people, but that's not my full story. So in order to better explain that, I thought if I present myself as these different characters, that I would almost trick the viewer into kind of making an assumption about the character presented in front of them. And then once they've kind of been on this journey, seeing all the different characters, they then realize that, oh, the photographer is the person in all of the pictures, and I really don't know anything about this person. That kind of clues you into how we just, all of us, navigate through the world and do this on a regular basis. I think we're taught to kind of put people in a box, like this is safe, we know how they are, we know who they are, based on those kind of quick reads. But it's kind of a reminder that, everyone has a bigger story, and just because you put them in that box, that might not be the box they want to be in. We kind of click through these. So a lot of the part of my, kind of creation of these worlds is that I'm going to places that I'm responding mostly just by what I put on myself. I went into that space and that was the furniture. I might not have even known what was going to be there, and at first glance thought I couldn't make a picture there. And then over this picture particularly, I did then go in and set up some things, like the objects in there kind of referencing advertisement, as if I was trying to sell you those products. This one's called Blackish. I was kind of playing off the sense of seeing all these images of people promoting the charcoal masks, and then instantly thinking of blackface. So playing with pop culture references like the TV show Blackish and relating to that. Through my, journey of photographing, this particular image was shot in a friend's house who's also biracial, who had this poster in her room, and it was like a relatable moment. So I felt I felt the need to kind of create this this image to address, maybe in a more obvious way, but this was called Colorblind's. Was shot in Los Angeles. I'm actually from Massachusetts, and so when I moved to LA, there was this cool thing where you're just oh, the light is always amazing here. You don't have to do anything. But when I first moved here, I didn't really know anyone, so I would have to walk out into the street to find my locations. I didn't have access so much, so this is just me putting on something in my studio, going out into the world with my assistant, and just trying to make something happen. So installation is also a big part of my practice. I refer to my installations as psychological spaces. It's like a creation where the viewer can go in and have this safe space that kind of feels nostalgic and feels like they're placed in like a familiar home space, but at the same time, things are juxtaposed to like really make you unpack your feelings about or beliefs about things around class and race and gender. I also use mirrors a lot in my work because although the work stems from a more personal space, the issues are more universal. So I really want the viewer to acknowledge that they're part of the story. So the hand mirrors kind of started as like this idea of the original selfie. So you see your, like that's the first selfie. I thought that was funny, but then on a more, kind of thoughtful way, like the differences in the mirrors representing people and their differences. This is another installation. So you're kind of seeing in my earlier kind of attempts, I was putting the photography inside the installations to make me say like, oh, this is this person's space. But now I've gotten a little bit, like I'm less concerned with having the photo be the thing that anchors you to the creep of the installation. But it's a really interesting experience to be in a space that you've created that feels familiar, and then have so many people from different walks of life have that same connection. And so you kind of see the work doing the work as people are experiencing it. So if we talk about, there is this like sense of trying to feel like unique as an individual, but differences being a negative. But if we're also different, then why are people having this same like nostalgic or like peaceful moment in these spaces? So I think about that when I'm watching people. Another thing is, going out to the world, creating these moments, but at the same time, like this particular image was shot right at a stoplight area, so like I'm getting catcalled and all of these things are happening around me, so like there's this shift that you have to like know you're trying to create a thing for the camera while blocking out all of like, I'm really nervous when I go out to photograph. I don't usually know what I'm looking for, and I never really know what I'm going to find, so especially when it's not in the interior, it's quite, my least favorite thing to do. Yeah. Oh, there you go. I guess there's this specific, I don't know, granny vibe to my work. Like, I guess I'm an old soul, if you will. But it, now as time has gone on and people are more maybe open to me going into their spaces, I can find a space and be like, oh, do you mind if I photograph in your home? And so I have a little bit more flexibility to kind of respond to their space, then take on, my own like ideas or, a stereotype of who might live here. Because I'm thinking about how I read it, and I'm thinking about how the viewer, once it's a photograph, might read it. I don't know what I was thinking. And I also say that I'm not like a photographer's photographer. But then I'll have a moment maybe like this that I feel like, oh, maybe I'm like going back to like my, like the traditions that I was taught. it's interesting because Armis was also like a huge influence for me, but more thinking about like, oh, I'm one of the people that she would have photographed because she was known for photographing like the freak, the other, and so there's this famous image of hers of an interracial couple on a park bench, and so I'm like, oh, if that was considered that, then I would have, been the product of that and photographed. I'm also often compared to Cindy Sherman, but I think that it seems like at least more often she's like, oh, she's every woman, but I never felt like that connection to it. So I felt like there was openness enough beyond with my story that she wasn't able to tap into, that I feel comfortable still kind of taking on this way of photographing. I also have a twin sister. No, I'm joking. Sometimes I put myself in the picture more than once. This was shot in New Orleans. This is the base of one of the Confederate monuments that was up there that had been taken down. So there's all of these empty pillars. And I just wanted to activate it and kind of put something back on top of those that was more empowering and more inclusive. So installation and collage is another way that I work. And it's like, the collage is like almost like the connecting dots between the photographs and the installations. They almost are able to say the thing that I can't quite say through the photograph or the installation. Yet they are using the same materials in a way. I'm using old vintage magazines, Life magazines, Ebony Jet magazines to, really further unpack this story. And it's interesting that through my practice, it's often said like, oh, she's using Ebony and Jet magazines. And that has to be specifically spoken about, because when I'm looking through, not so much Life, because they were, kind of telling a wider story, but the basic magazines, McCall's, Home and Gardens, I don't know, I can't think of all the names, but literally I'm turning through thousands of pages of these magazines and there's not a person of color on any page. So I have to go through the magazines, marketing towards Black folks in order to make a true story, which is what's happening in the collage works. So I usually have the white woman with her blindfold on, she's trying to say look at this thing, but I'm not looking at it. This photograph is actually part of the show at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. This one's called Trailblazer, A Dream Deferred. I'm holding a found painting or print of JFK and MLK. And I think of this character as almost being this almost time traveler, she's traveled from the past, bringing back this image from a future and just kind of informing folks of what's to come. But then we know what has come is, how much has changed and not changed. And these trees are kind of moving over her, almost like claws. I also say her, so I don't actually relate necessarily to the character once it's the photograph. This image kind of goes along the lines of that advertisement kind of vibe again. I found those bottles of hair conditioner and shampoo at the dollar store, and the name is White Rain, and I just kind of flipped that a little bit.
Hello everybody, and thank you for coming. You can just do all the pictures because I'm gonna start from 30 years ago when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I went to school, and I realized that I have a weak eyes. So the doctor prescribed a new lens for me, and when I started wearing the glasses, everyone laughed at me, and when I went to home, everyone said, "Oh, if you wear glasses, no one is going to get married with you, and no one doesn't want to date with you." So I decided to not wear glasses and prefer to see everywhere blurry. And even right now, even if I want to date with somebody, I just don't wear the glasses. Just kidding. But anyway, the first time I saw the word clear and just sharp was when I started taking a picture with my grandfather's camera who brought it from Japan. And I just thought to myself, why our eyes is not that sharp as camera pictures? So I get really into camera and photography. I studied painting because I believe the mother of art is painting. So I studied painting, but one of our professors, he was a professor of photography. The first day we got the class for photography, he said, "Go ahead and take a picture of 36 frame for me. One roll picture that I know what I should keep shooting." And when I brought the first row, she said, "You don't need to get my classes, you just go and print the pictures in the darkroom." So, and he said, "You can send this and that to the contest and you get the prize." And this is the first roll of the pictures I took. This is one of them. And it get the first place of the Biennale in Iran. So after that, I just get more to the photography, and I decided to be more photographer than the painter. And so to me, I believe I really know about the rules and all the rules around us, but I think to me rules is kind of anathema. And I told to myself I'm gonna find my own rules and show the audience you can have, even you, everyone can have their own rules. So this is my self-portrait. I was angry about something, and I just said, "Okay, I'm gonna stream for 3 hours." And I did stream for 3 hours, and I took a picture. I made one self-portrait picture and one video art for this series. We can go to the next picture. These are the series of Life of Shadow series. The first time I went to a footbridge, and I started taking pictures from the high place to the people who were walking across the street. My camera were confused. Is it the wrong? This is the right side, or this is the right side? I said, "This is the right side." And this is one of the things I can say. You can find your own rules in your life and your art. And when I rotate the pictures, I realize you give a new life and that the people are shadowing the shadow. The next picture. This is the same thing. And I usually don't do stage photography, so all of the people you can see here, I just see myself as a hunter, like a person who wants to shoot a lion. You know, knows where he has to go to find the lion. So I know where should I go first, and then I wait. The idea it's in my mind happen and take a picture because I believe this is more live. This is more realistic. Like I have my own life and they have their own life. So that's why it has several meaning in each picture. Next one. This is the first shot I did for this series. And the funny thing is, in the series I took this picture, there are lots of scratches and crack on the asphalt, and they just feel it with a really funny way, which is, the thing is, it really looks like the people writing something on the ground. This is a Stalker series. The Stalker, this is kind of my childhood, and when the first time I got my, I saw the word in the camera because you have a huge blurry around and you have just sharp and focusing in the middle. In these pictures, I again rotate the pictures because the stalker rotates one time the subject, and I did one more time because the stalker is going to tell the story, and I love rotating the pictures. Next one. This is the same thing, same series. This is another things that I so. The rotating picture, it's coming from the parallel life, and the other things I was always crazy about gymnastics and handstanding and walking on my hand, and I just love to see everything upside down. But I still try to have makes sense each time you learn with next one. This is in the museum Lowery. This is Mona Lisa and something. The same things happen here. This is the last one, right? Oh, this is my new series. I still rotate the pictures. I love having multi-way meaning in each word, and I really love to give the audience the chance to get their own meaning of each piece. So I just prefer to not say anything for this, and I will pass it to you. Go ahead.
I'm Malerie. I brought very few pictures of my work, so just because it's a group and I didn't want to take up too much time. Yeah, just open it. Okay. This picture was the first picture that had any real meaning for me. I was 18, and I was taking a class with Stephen Shore at Bard, and I was a freshman. And just to give some context, you know, that week people were bringing in pictures of, you know, the intersection, Tivoli. They brought in pictures of their cats. They brought in pictures of like a parent photo. They brought in a picture of a still life. And I brought in a set of pictures that, you know, everyone was like, "What the hell are you doing?" We had just been given a demonstration of the 4x5 in our class, and I connected with this camera in a different way for me. It's not obvious here because this is a really bad print made from an even more pitiable negative. It has a scratch, it's got a light leak, but what happened and what unfolded for me was like a real primal moment when I took on and became sort of the core where I knew I had to repeat myself over and over. And the woman in the picture was a family friend who I'd grown up with. She was like an older sister to me. And she called me and asked if I could photograph her and her lover, boyfriend. And I was like keenly unaware, you know, they drove like 12 hours, booked the nicest hotel in the area, and I arrived with my 4x5 camera and I could barely focus. And they got naked, and you know, I was made privy to their kinky love affair. But you know, when I was printing the pictures in the darkroom, I'm old, so there's going to be a lot of analog references. You know, everyone was like veering away from me and couldn't even understand what I was doing, and I was scared to show them too. But Stephen, who was very serious, and particularly at that time, and an incredible artist himself, but he was, you know, he was a hard teacher, and he looked at me like, you know, was totally quiet, looked over the pictures, and this is the only picture I have, by the way. The others were burned by the man in the picture. That's how powerful the negatives were for him. The other backstory is that he wanted me to be involved in their tryst, so that's why I was there. But he looked at me and he said, "Can you photograph them every week?" So, you know, I knew I was kind of onto something. But they were, you know, the thing that happened was that they had this intense connection to each other, this intense attachment that wasn't being realized in their lives. So, you know, now, you know, as I grew up, I was reminded of Diane Arbus's words: "A photograph is a secret of a secret." And that's what I tried to do each and every time, but I got better at the photography parts. So this is from like a series of pictures. I guess I made 30 or some images in black and white, and then about the same amount in color. And they're all in this book, Carnal Knowledge, and they're over the 11 years. But they all kind of follow a little bit of the same ideas, and although, you know, different, I don't know, we'll see what comes out. But this is, you know, very precise imagery in terms of stark setting, TV, two figures, you know, their faces in shadow. But so it's a lot of imprecise narrative, but with a definitive feeling of place and certain elements that were really important to me. And I just got kind of more nuanced in how to make this moment charged with seeing less. And that's something that I thought a lot about. So, you know, for me, the biggest thing is like, yeah, the people are naked, but I always imagine them with their clothes on. And if it still works, then it's a good image, because it was never about, you know, the nakedness. It was just a metaphor for a no bullshit conversation. This is a picture that was like one of the few that was taken outdoors. Most of my work is really inside. I really have a love for the indoors, but you know, I lit it the same way. It's like all these tungsten lights. It's funny, I was at Yale at this point. And for the other picture too, I was at Yale. I took those pictures. I went to graduate school there. But you know, I strung lights all outside, and I had Winston Link come talk to us, and he was like incredible. You know, if you know his work. But he did all these pictures of trains. By the end of the talk, we were all in tears. He was so moving, but he spoke about his love of trains. That's the only thing that moved him. He wasn't interested in art per se. It's like this total passion for trains. So if you look at his work, they're just so gorgeous. But he had a really elaborate setup where he had a group of lights that would go off at once. And my pictures were a little bit similar in that I would have a lot of lights and a really long, I only work with a 4x5, by the way, 4x5 and 5x7. So once I had that 4x5 moment, I didn't stop with that camera. So, you know, this is like a long exposure. She's not quite in focus. and it's what makes it good. If she were perfectly in focus, if she were just like, if I had her in like my grasp and she was just mine in that way, it really wouldn't be as good an image. It's just that she's kind of, there's an element of human error in this picture that makes it real, and that makes her more believable and beautiful and kind of like a Lolita-like moment, immature, innocent, vulnerable is what I was going for. And I photographed this young girl a lot. So the other part of the work is all in color, and this is one of the pictures that I took. It was the time me and my boyfriend, and I just it's like John Cassavetes said, all that matters is love. I'm only interested in love, negative love, positive love. That's all that matters. And so that's what I was thinking about. I just want to take a picture that was more like an X-ray than a Valentine. And this is a picture of my father who's passed away since. It's titled Victor Marder, and I had this series in the book that's, examines the erotic undertow of like the family dynamic. So there were a lot of pictures of my mother and father, a lot of pictures of my mother with my old boyfriend, a lot of pictures, that were suggestive of stuff without anything really happening. But this is like a real rollover. So this was, I thought, the most successful of the group, of my dad, because he's like a baby in this blanket. And it was a very difficult picture for me to take. My mom was in the room too, but it wasn't about the nudity, it was about the intimacy and just how these moments, you just never, you don't get this kind of thing, you're not allowed to do this kind of thing. Somehow, even though all its families were all, whatever, it's a veneer of what life is. A lot of the pictures too are self-portrait, but not really self-portrait at this point. Like, I'm kind of like, sometimes I was in that other picture in black and white, but it's like I'm sort of a shadow or kind of pushing the picture along. And this is like, you see me a little bit more. But I had photographed a lot in hotels and things like that because they were transient in setting, and I thought they were good and that they were like in contrast to the intimacy that was happening in the picture. And I also just had this outrageous interiors, these short stay motels. So this was like under a disco light. It was a 7-second exposure. Another picture from that time, a little bit later. Maybe one of the first pictures I took in LA. I was really, I'm from the East Coast and I came out here and no one really understood my coming because I had a gallery at this point. And 2 in New York and 1 in London, and I really was more European and East Coast, but I kind of just wanted to come out here, and I was really attracted to LA for its large atmosphere, order, ambience, and that seemed like the perfect setting for fiction for me. I don't know why that's small. Oh, that's bizarre. I'm sorry. I did this other book and series of pictures titled Anatomy. It's a bummer, it's small. There were prostitutes in the Netherlands, and mostly in Rotterdam. And I was really interested in making a body of work that was solely of women, and of making also work where I wouldn't necessarily have like a connection to these women, where like my camera acted as a passport into their world. And it was very much a meditation on luck, and how if I had different luck, I could have been on the other side of the camera. And there's about 36 images. With the other, body of work, there's a lot of text, a lot of writing with the work, like James Ellroy and James Fry and Bruce Wagner, and a lot of people, A.M. Holmes, who had written about that picture of that girl on the raft, where she made a whole short story of it, and it was published in the New Yorker with my picture, just based on seeing that image. And then she ended up making, just recently, an opera about the picture, which is really wild. She wrote me and said that she had made it into a play opera. But anyway, I digress. But this is, I was like, similar things were still drawing me to this subject matter. And also, I said this thing about the secrecy. There's no more secret place in a brothel house. And then here's another picture. Like I said, there's like 36 of these, but whatever. I'm sorry the other one didn't come through. So, and their interiors are really garish, and but you don't get a real sense of the place. Like, you know, I kind of needed the women so that they could transcend it for like even the moment of the photograph, and they were very in part of this process with me. Like, it wasn't like I came in and it was like witnesses to an aftermath of a crime, even though that does happen in these contexts. And it was a sad project for me because a lot of these women could meet a violent end, given the dangers of the profession. But they were really part of the image making. So I made a film, a short film titled Romeo, and it's shot on black and white, 35mm. It's like about 11, 12 minutes. I just finished it last year, and this is a still. It's all told in voiceover. It's like this one young girl's waiting for a phone call from her lover, and we've all been there. She's going out of her mind. But it's sort of a funny, and it swings her for the fences. It's both funny and you feel for her. And this is the moment between them where she's talking to him without, her lips moving. One of the best things that happened with this, the biggest compliments, was that a lot of people watched it and they said, that was voiceover? Which was totally great. Like, they thought it wasn't voiceover. And the reason why I did voiceover is just because I didn't have enough money to do really him talking. It was a shot on film, for Christ's sake. I was selling things out of my apartment to make it. And this is like one of the last images from that. Thanks so much.
And maybe we'll just leave one of your images up on the screen so we have something to have in the background as a visual. If you don't mind, the photo of your dad is pretty powerful. But thank you so much to all four of you for your presentations of your work, different approaches that you take to image making and to narrative and storytelling. In some ways, I think a discussion of narrative and photography is kind of a structuralist conversation, or a little bit post-structuralist. It's about how images work and how they function, right, for us. But it's one that's not linguistic, it's kind of pre-linguistic, right? How do we feel and see images before we start to tell ourselves the stories of the images in words, right? And so this photograph of Malerie Marder is, I think, is one where there's an immediate identification in some way, depending on where you stand, right? In life, with your parents, with your own children, and there's a sensibility that arises before you start to unpack what might be going on in the photograph. And I think all four of you in different ways make work that's very much like that is impactful on first glance in a narrative way, but it's an emotional narrative, right, that then you start to unpack and connect with maybe in a linguistic way. And I think there's another commonality that you have, which is, photography has famously been described by art, especially, right, as a record of the past, as a having been there rather than being there, right? And he said that there's no future in a photograph, but the way that you all suggest possibilities, to me, actually opens up a sense of at least the present, but an imagination of the future as well. So there's a temporal shift, I think, that each of you undergoes in the work that you make. My question for you to begin with is why photography? What does photography help you to do in making the images you want to make and telling the stories you want to make?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to exactly answer that, but just when I first made my first pictures, I had this sense of control of my ownness, and I had mentioned Arbus as being.
So I think I kind of answered this question before. As I said, I had weak eyes. But on the other hand, to me, photography really works. Why? Because I believe there's a fine line between reality and dream. And whenever you think that you get the reality, you are dreaming again. And that's why, because photography really shows that you have the realistic, but in a way that I work with and rotate the pictures. I have my own dream in it. I think this is the best material it works for me.
I mean, I work in a lot of different mediums, but it tends to end up as a photograph. I think for one, but I think most photographers I know are sort of like nostalgia monsters. Like, I think we hold, like, I think, especially as photographers, we really, like you said, it's a record of the past, and I think we hold on to the past in this way. And I think photography to me is always sort of like romantic because you're like longing for the past. And it's like, oh, this thing doesn't exist anymore, but like now that I have this record that is like sort of a poor substitute. And photography for me, I mean, I make delicate things, and so photography is a way of like freezing it. It's sort of practical, it makes the frame. Because often when I'm making an installation, I'm like, well, I don't know where this ends, but here's this way of like flattening it and framing it, and it's like, it's one approach. It's like, okay, here's an image, and like, sure, like this is a moment that could be the work, but in some ways it's sort of like the whole process of making stuff and recycling things and trying things out and like looking. Yeah, and I think for me, photography is so much about looking, is that I'm in my studio a lot, making things, so it's like, you know, it's noticing. It's like, oh yeah, I want to record my noticing. And that sort of like happens with the camera for me.
There seems to be a similarity too, in some ways, with Genevieve's work in the relationship to objects in the staging of the work. I mean, I know, Genevieve, that you are kind of a scavenger of stuff in the world, right? And you're always kind of searching for the right objects to bring into both your photographs and the installations, right? And so that must be, in some ways, an analog process of experimenting with this framed photograph, right, this mirror, and seeing whether they fit the project and getting a sense from an object. Is that true? Do you know when you find something that you want to use it?
Yeah, I've got, like, I fine-tuned my eye. I think earlier we were talking about that, early on it was like, oh yeah, I'll just take everything that comes my way, but now over time, hey, I can't store all of this stuff, and be like, it's like you're just more keyed into like your language, so those objects become part of your language.
I think the nostalgia part's there, also that it's associated with the real has always interested me. That it actually is, but also that it's so manipulative in that way. And just the camera itself, like I'm very attracted to the ground glass and the 4x5. I have very specific lighting, you know, I'm really like HMI, like sunlight, but all these things are like kind of specific for me. And so even when I made the film, it's like I really want to shoot it on film, just because I know film. So, I don't know, you know, there's like almost like ideas that I associate with these things, but then there's also just like practicalities.
And what kind of stories do each of you feel that you're telling in your work? I can certainly give you my interpretations, but I would love to hear from each of you how you relate to your images as narrative.
I think, you know, I have to, I guess I come to the work with an understanding of how we kind of tend to view things or view people and categorize. So I have my take, but I'm interested, like the word does the work when the viewer is allowed to make up that thing. And sometimes it's dead on, and other times I'm like, oh, they didn't see what I saw at all, you know? So I'm not the one that's gonna tell you like what the but
Yeah, that's fair.
you know?
I mean, I think for me, my work, I think it's hard for me to sometimes read how the pictures come across because I'm there in the space making the work. And so that, I think that's true for all photographers, that you're so there and you know what the people are like or what the place is like. And then to be a viewer who doesn't have that sort of like what's outside the frame it's hard to relate in a certain way. But for me, I like that part of photography. I think there's a sort of like denial. You deny the actual person or the place, you deny context. And so you're kind of only, what I like about photography is that you're kind of like, you're giving like a surface of the thing. You're not giving the actual thing or the feeling, or you're giving a feeling, but you're not giving the actual material. It's like an image of the material always. So I'm sort of interested in that push-pull. I want the pictures to be like emotive and full of feeling, but then they were denied the actual presence of the objects or the things.
Yeah, no, I think that just love stories, and actually what I've been writing is really love stories. So they're not necessarily fulfilled love stories, but yes.
I love what you said about that one photograph being an X-ray rather than a Valentine, right? It's much more kind of profound take on thinking about love and what that emotion is about and that connection is.
Yeah, I think that the pictures themselves are often about a failed sense of connection, even though there's an intimate moment happening. I mean, definitely with my writing now, it's that love kind of strips us bare, makes us vulnerable, and in that state, you end up heartbroken. So it's more likely that that's going to be the outcome than the narrative.
So I usually try to have multi-meaning in my work, at least two meaning, which the two story in my work is usually the opposite of each other. For example, I work Advocartsy means information, which it was from before the revolution, newspapers, and I did installation something in the newspaper, and I renewed the newspaper and I made it contemporary, and I showed it in my country, Persia, and the TV came and interviewed me as it ways that they thought I beat the government. My first meaning was the opposite, but they got the second one and they showed it in the TV. So that's why I love to have these two stories in my work, and it works for me till now. I'm still alive.
Another thing that I think you all do in very different ways from one another is kind of just make visible how strange it is that we live constantly with images and stories, right? Our brains are wired to tell stories. I'm narrativizing the way human brains work right this second, right? And all of these things, the images, especially in contemporary life, but they're not inherent to us, right? They are invaders a little bit in our host bodies that live with us so constantly that we kind of forget to notice that they are not necessarily inherent to our person or our biology, right? And in kind of queering your images in various ways, to use that that in a very loose way, right? Whether putting on characters, right, or anthropomorphizing inanimate objects and creating a vision of kind of imagination, pictures of imagination, or noticing moments that are literally visible to us, but it takes turning the camera 90 degrees or 180 degrees to actually see, right? Or looking at the difficulty of connection, right, and love. You make visible something that is so weird, that is with us constantly, and is so little thought of in terms of how it makes up our relationships, our senses of self, right? So the way we work in the world, the way larger power structures work, right? It's an under-theorized space, and I think that the direct visual communication of your images helps cuts through the noise in some way. To look at the strangeness of that and how it kind of structures our lives. I wonder if any of you think in any way along those terms about kind of like exercising the stories that are within and the images that are within. How, Genevieve, you're talking about how one sees oneself, right, and how it looks different in a photograph. The camera can do something that writing can't do, right, that a painting doesn't do in the same way. Up and abstract.
Yeah, I'm like, yes, all of that stuff. But I'm not sure exactly what to put on. But
I mean, I think one of the things about like being surrounded by images all the time more and more is that it becomes harder and harder to make images that are new to us, or that are like, oh, I've never seen something like that before. And I know for me, my work and like my practice is, I feel like I have to fight a lot more for it. Like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna delete Instagram and like try to get away from image making so that I can so that I can get my attention span back, and then I can like look at things. And I think that for me, like most visual art making that's interesting, like requires really looking at things and thinking about things in a way that we are being like robbed of, maybe. I mean, there's interesting work to be done with social media, but I'm not sure it's possible. That's a different specific conversation. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the challenge that we have now, especially as photography is now, it used to be a thing that like, now everyone knows about photography. Everyone has taken a photograph and can take a pretty good photograph with their phone. So like what makes a photograph special or interesting or worthwhile is a little bit of an interesting more question.
I think it's always been that photography was so easy, it's what made it hard. I think that's always been there. You know, the camera is even before the iPhone, which is made it more simple. It was still an easy form of, you know, art or whatever you want to call it. Like it was an easy expression. But I think the hard thing becomes then how do you really make it good, given all that. And yeah, there's like an overload of images. I mean, in some ways, there's been like more. Yeah, it's funny. The thing that I'm so opinionated on this, so it's about how images work and how they function. But for me, it just becomes like it's a device. Like if you see a certain body of work that's like crudely told, that's a device. If someone's not using it in a way where they know that that's what they're doing, then they don't know what they're doing. If they're doing it purposely, then they're absolutely, you know, using that in order to convey an idea. So the same thing happens when something's really, you know, almost like trying to be very perfect. It's like, are you using sort of ideas of perfection, you know, to make an impact? Or you know, when something's a little bit hyperbolic, just slightly, you know, is sort of where I'm always trying to go. But where it's real, you know, you want people to believe it, you want everyone to disarm themselves and to be authentic, but there's something that's artificial about this. You know, the lighting is a little artificial, and the lighting itself becomes a voice in the image, and the room is the other voice, and they're all characters, you know, so that's why it's like when people use the word documentary, it doesn't exist, you know, it's an idea, that's just a word. There's absolutely no such thing as a documentary photograph.
And I think the thing is, if you give a life to your picture and you are sure that your picture is living it has a real life, like a poet, there's a very famous poet in my country named Hafiz from many years ago, but still everybody reading it, and they have. And the good things of Hafiz is the Hafiz believe each individual has their own understanding of the subject. So when you have that in your picture, and even when you change the mood, and for example, you see something in the picture today, but when you change the mood tomorrow and you see something new in it, it means it's alive. Words can be words.
Thank you. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has questions for our panelists. Not all at once.
Can ask
There's
you.
the microphone right up here.
Thank you so much. My question has to do with narrative and fiction. Is there some thought placed in that while you were making the work, or is it going to start at all? So, stay with that.
What are we thinking about?
With the read the paper hits when they look at the photo afterwards, are you concerned about what they take away, or are you trying to communicate a particular item? You kind of touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
But us coming up with a broader discussion.
Yeah. I think with all of the work I make, it's created to ask more questions and create a dialogue with a lot of the stuff I'm touching on and are harder topics, and people don't really know how to maybe start the conversation. And I'm not saying I do either, but yes, I'm thinking like, oh, this could lead to maybe just help them, whoever's looking at it, walk away and just shift their thinking a little bit, you know? I'm not trying to be like, this is how I want you to think or walk away with this, but I think if the work is doing a thing where it draws you in so you feel like you're part of it, but at the same time you're learning something new that you didn't intend to, then yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. And that's what happens.
I didn't think about the viewer at all. In fact, I try not to think about the viewer. It's really a conversation with myself. But I never thought about, when I made the work, I didn't know if it would ever be shown. I was lucky that it got shown when I was really young. When I did anatomy, I lost my galleries. I didn't have a book. I had no idea what it was going to be. It was like the moment of total insanity. I lost my shirt ultimately. I lost all my money. To be specific. You know, it's always been an act of total insanity. It's never, ever, ever been like, oh, and now once this is seen, you know, it's something that you can never anticipate in my mind.
This is to Malerie, I think most of all, but to all of you. So there's a really strong sense, some more than others, in all your different pictures of a kind of a before and an after in these kind of narrative pictures. And I was wondering if you're going into it with that idea of what the before and after is. In other words, you have a narrative in mind and you're staging that, or you have a narrative in mind and you're trying to find it, or what?
It's a really good question. I don't know if I can answer it completely. A good way of saying it is that sometimes it'll be like something happens, like an accident happens, and those are usually the best pictures, meaning that whatever I have in my head is going to be, thrown, and then something better happens. I've always found that to be true, just because it's almost like I think it's the hardest thing, is to make something believable. Like really make it like a felt moment, and still have taking it essentially and being in control of it. It's hard to let go of that control. So even if I have like a before and after, or like this is what's going, it's usually someone does something, or their eyes, even like an eye movement, it strangely just changes the entire image. And I've got to say too, sometimes like pictures without the face and everything lend a lot more mystery. And I've learned from that. It's like the silences between images, the silences between what we say, like silences in film. It's really important. It's like a lot more is said. If you like examine a lot of films, like your favorite films, you'll see like a lot of them rely on huge like epic pregnant moments of silence. And so it's really that beautiful accent that I'm not in charge of that makes any of it work.
Are you shooting a lot of images and then editing a lot, or?
It depends, not that much, but I have a ton of images I've never shown, like hundreds. I've thrown away 500 negatives easily that I've never shown, which was dumb, but I was just tired of moving them from space to space when I was younger. I should have held on to them. I guess the answer is I shot a lot, but I tend to shoot less now. Yeah.
And the rest of you, anybody else on that?
But even like specifically with the camera you use, it makes you slow down. Where when depending on where I am, like if I'm shooting out on the street, then there's this urgency to like make something, but also usually after every shoot I'm like, that was a bust, and I did like nothing happened, and I can't even look at them for like a few days.
Is that because you hate, as you said, the street?
Well, it's not even. It's not that I hate it, but it's like there's something that I'm asking of myself to do for the camera, which it's easier if I'm pointing the camera at you, and there's a conversation or not, waiting for something to happen. But yeah, I'm just because you're in some of your images as well, but so I don't know if there's something different when you're doing.
The hate process goes deep. I mean, I don't even know how to say this without just being blunt about it, but I've literally I remember the red cow picture was put up at the Met, and I went in, and this was my reaction to it. I was mortified. I was like, I can't even believe I'm in this museum. This is so outrageous to me. I don't deserve this. There's no winning. There's no winning. It's like, and I have no idea why it's like that. But when you're feeling, when you're living in my mom's basement, which I was with my 2 children, that didn't feel good either. So, but there's just no winning. It's very hard to have, and I wondered if it's because I'm in it or whatever. I don't think so. I think it's because I'm putting myself out there, and just like everyone else is putting themselves out there, whether you're in it or not. And you're like, there's something so naked about that for everyone, and that's why a lot of there's a whole other.
Well, so that's the after of your narrative, right? So.
Yes, exactly. That's the after of my narrative. It was like total humiliation.
Thank you.
More of a technical question. How did you shoot yourself in the photo? Did you have an assistant, or did you?
Yeah.
Are you in some of your photos? Okay. How did you do that?
I used a timer, a self-timer. I've never had an assistant.
Oh, so cool. Wow.
And I have a lot of money, so I always have an assistant. Not joking.
Lucky you.
No, most of the time I'm going out with someone that isn't a photographer, which makes it tricky, but I like the explaining, so it still feels like me. And then also, yeah, I'm setting it up on a tripod, so I have like another series of whoever I'm with is the picture, you know? But there's less of me trying to make a moment with them, because I know that I won't be in the image. Yeah, so I'm shooting on a tripod.
Just as like a test.
Yeah, and then I'm like, but I'm going back and forth, so I'm like performing, and then I'm like, okay, stop. I want to see if I'm getting at the thing, so I come around at it, and then I basically tell them what to see that I'm seeing.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I use assistants when I do my commercial, so I just ignore them at all. Be like totally of course, I'm like the most loyal assistant on the planet. I love him to death. And when I was in Rotterdam, this art collector was essentially my assistant. He, you know, but to your idea, like I've never had an assistant in my personal work, even in the Rotterdam project, he didn't know photography. That's why he was there. So, you know, he was funding my work, but like I wish I had my beautiful assistant with me when I was doing that, because it was hard. But I don't think it disrupts the moment at all. I don't know. I didn't know how to explain what the hell I was doing at the time. I was just saying.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we've actually come to the end of our time with perfect precision. So I want to really thank all four of our panelists for being here today. Thank you so much for sharing.